All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating and honestly deeply relatable behavioral science behind why you might feel completely disconnected in your daily life, even if you had zero obvious childhood trauma. We're looking at the silent, invisible weight of emotional neglect. I mean, think about it for a second. You walk into a crowded room, someone steps directly into your path, and before you can even process it, what do? You say, I'm sorry. Or, maybe you can go days without talking to anyone, just totally isolating yourself. We're going to explore why simple, everyday actions like these are actually profound psychological signals, telling a much deeper story about your past. Most people just assume these ingrained habits, like feeling super guilty just for having basic needs, are, well, quirky personality traits. You probably tell yourself, hey, that's just who I am. But behavioral psychology reveals something entirely different. These are actually deeply trained survival responses. They were literally wired into you during a period of your development when you simply had no choice but to adapt to your environment. So let's start with layer one, the invisible quiet wound, and the trauma of absence. Let's get clear on what emotional neglect actually is. It's not physical abuse. It's not some massive, dramatic, visible event. It's the quiet kind of trauma of what was absent during your emotional development. It's what happens when the caregivers responsible for you just weren't there emotionally. They didn't ask how you felt or teach you that your inner world even mattered. And because nothing visibly happened, you develop these hidden reactions that feel completely normal to you simply because, well, you've always had them. You don't even realize it's a wound. Let's break down how this actually looks in practice with layer one, shrinking to survive, specifically looking at the social behaviors. You might notice a pattern in your life, apologizing constantly, refusing to ask for help, or completely hiding your real struggles. All of these stem from a childhood environment where your emotional expression was likely met with irritation, dismissal, or maybe just withdrawal. You learned a truly heartbreaking lesson super early on. Your emotions, and by extension, your very presence, were basically just inconvenient. So what did you do? You learned to shrink. Let's go back to that apology reflex. Say a meeting runs late because a colleague absolutely wouldn't stop talking, and you apologize for going overtime. That right there, that is a preemptive shield. By the time you're an adult, you don't even feel the apology anymore. It's just a reflex. But it's a remnant of a kid who learned that taking up space was dangerous. So catching yourself apologizing, literally just for existing, yeah, that's not politeness. That's a wound. This exact same environment breeds what psychologists call hyper-independence. Now, you know our culture absolutely loves to celebrate self-reliance, right? But in its extreme form, this intense reluctance to ask for help is definitely not a superpower. It is a fear-based coping mechanism. A child whose needs were consistently ignored doesn't magically stop having needs. They just internalize the belief that their needs don't matter, or that asking is somehow shameful. As an adult, this masks itself as fierce independence, but honestly, it's really just a shield to avoid feeling like a burden. Consequently, when you're genuinely struggling through a really hard time, you compress your feelings. You just seal them right away. The logic your inner child concluded was, hey, when I have feelings, it just makes things worse. The safest thing is to need absolutely nothing. So you perform this incredibly convincing state of okayness. It's so convincing, in fact, that literally no one even sees you falling apart. But make no mistake, maintaining that psychological mask is intensely exhausting. You're tired in a way that a good night's sleep just doesn't touch. Which brings us to layer two, the discomfort of being seen and the validation deficit. Think about how you react when someone tells you did a great job. Do you immediately brush it off with, oh, it was nothing, or deflect it with a joke? Sitting with a compliment and actually letting it land probably feels almost physically uncomfortable for you. If you grew up in a home where achievements were just met with silence, your nervous system never really learned how to safely receive warmth. So it looks like humility on the outside is actually a defense mechanism on the inside. Your brain is essentially screaming, don't look too closely at me, because if you do, you might leave. Similarly, you might notice you've become the ultimate caregiver for everyone else. You're the friend who remembers every single birthday, who holds space during a crisis, who can reliably be called at 2 a.m. But you leave almost nothing for your own emotional maintenance. In a neglectful household, a kid becomes hyper-attuned to the moods of others just to survive. You learned that making yourself useful earned your place. Caregiving basically became your currency of belonging, and as an adult, you're still tirelessly trying to earn that belonging, which creates a massive, exhausting imbalance in your relationships. This intense discomfort with being seen also pretty much destroys your ability to handle even mild conflict. A harsh text message or a slightly raised voice can send your nervous system into a complete fight, flight, or shutdown response. Why? Well, because the ability to tolerate conflict is actually learned through a healthy cycle of rupture, repair, and reconnection. If you never experienced the repair part, like if conflict just meant cold silence or absence, your nervous system learned that conflict equals abandonment. So your outsized reaction today isn't really about the present moment at all. It's a response to a pattern set years and years ago. All right, let's dive even deeper into layer 3, disconnecting from yourself, and exploring this profound internal disconnection. At the deepest, most invisible layer of this whole psychological iceberg, we find a profound disconnection from your own emotional state. Psychologist Jonice Webb identifies this as the empty feeling. It's not necessarily depression or even anxiety. It's more of a persistent, low-grade sense that something is just slightly wrong with you. A feeling that you're just performing in social situations, and that everyone else somehow got a manual for life that you totally missed out on. This hollow feeling is born from an internal system that was simply never taught how to read its own emotional information. Let's actually test that right now. If someone looks at you right this second and asks a direct question, like, how are you feeling about this? What happens? You might experience this long, completely blank pause. You might have an analysis ready or a reasoned perspective, but you have genuine uncertainty about what your body is actually telling you. There is actually a clinical term for this, Alexithymia. It literally translates to having no words for emotions. And surprisingly, an estimated 10% of the population experiences it to some degree. When your emotions were consistently dismissed as a kid, you didn't stop having them, you just stopped tracking them. Your internal feedback loop was muted. It's kind of like trying to read a book in a language you were literally never taught. It happens not because you don't care, but because you were never handed a map to your own interior life. In its most chronic form, this long-term emotional neglect actually leads to dissociation or depersonalization. This is when you feel like you're watching your own life from the outside. You could be right in the middle of a major, significant life moment, a big celebration, a deep connection, and you feel like you're just observing the whole shebang through a pane of glass. It's a protective measure. Your psyche learned that if you aren't fully present, whatever happens can't fully hurt you. It protected you from the bad, sure, but tragically, it also completely muted the good. But listen, there is absolutely a way forward, which brings us to the resolution. You are not broken. As we reframe these behaviors, the absolute most crucial takeaway from this explainer is this. If you recognized yourself in these patterns today, you are not fundamentally broken. Every single behavior we've discussed, apologizing just to keep the peace, the hyperindependence, maintaining emotional distance, these were highly, highly intelligent adaptations. You did them right. They were incredibly smart ways to survive a childhood environment that simply didn't give you what you needed to thrive. The core issue we face today is really just a matter of outdated software. Your environment changed. You grew up. You're safe now. But the adaptations, well, they stayed. And because there was no dramatic, visible traumatic event to point your finger at, you tragically mistook these survival responses for your permanent personality. You thought, well, I guess this is just who I am. So the absolutely crucial point is this. You are not your adaptations. It is so essential to recognize that you are not your defense mechanisms. You are the vibrant, feeling person who existed way before you ever needed to shrink, before you ever needed to build a wall, and long before you ever needed to protect yourself from the quiet trauma of absence. And that leaves us with one incredibly important question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Armed with the understanding of these hidden psychological roots and knowing that your hollow feelings and constant apologies were actually just armor, how will you begin the brave process of taking off that armor and finally reconnecting with the true, unadapted version of yourself that was left behind?